born in 1936, if that's what you want to hear.
Yes. Yes.
So I consider myself a senior citizen. Last year I celebrated my 80th birthday, and I was very, very excited about that. And really went back on my knees to thank God, because that's a long time to live. I always used to go back to God because my mother died when I was 6 years old, and always had that fight with God that is not right for a mother to die. And I remember praying very seriously once that my daughter, last daughter, should be 16 before I die. I felt 16 was a good age to cope with life, but particularly, and here I'm sinful, particularly to survive the issue of any other mother that comes into the compound. I had to apologize to my husband because of that, because he's now 87 and has never thought of bringing anybody else to her union. So I'm very happy about that. So I felt very grateful to God. That's really the point I'm trying to make, because I think it was after when my daughter was 16, I had to go back and thank God, but also recognize that what I was doing was a sin, because lives, whether it is mine or that of my children or anybody else, belongs to Him. And it's He who dictates when you come in and when you exit. So trying to pray that it should go this way or that way, I think I learned ages ago that if you surrender to God, He will use you for His own purposes. So that's the way I look at my life. That's the way I look at my life. That God wanted me here or there, and somehow He enabled me. He enabled me. I don't think I have any achievements of my own. I deny them completely, because I can see God's hand. Like you see, I've told you, I had a very, very disadvantaged childhood because of the death of my mother. That was, and I didn't know. I mean, I was playing, you know, and but I never forget to say my mother had already enrolled me in school. For me, when I look back, that was critical. Not only that, but He had taught us children to read and to write on the ashes. There were no books. On the ashes, we would, you know, level like this and write on the ashes. I mean, that was incredible. Reading, I can't say I did, but writing, definitely. So I claim that I had a head start in education. A head start because when I went to school, I was actually being carried by my aunties on their backs. And my aunties were in the same class. And I knew a lot more than they did. They were starting from scratch, but I kind of understood quickly what the teachers were saying. Is that what you call a head start in education?
Yes,
I think so. I think so.
Maybe you can tell us just a bit about your journey in education, academic.
Academic, that was primary. I reached standard 5. I passed common entrance, and that was the end of school for my school. So my father had to look out for me to go to standard 6, to what was known as primary top. I used to walk 10 kilometers at that age, that year, in order to go to school. Anyway, I went to class. What I remember is that I was the only girl in that class. And that for me turned out to be quite significant, because obviously it gave me courage. I was no longer timid. First of all, the travel to school, harassment kabisa. because the conditions then, the weather, the rain, all kinds of weather. Today I ask myself, was it worth it? But I say definitely it was worth it. From there, I went to a boarding school, a Loreto convent. Somehow, if you were Protestant, you didn't feel at home. But that's not the point for discussion here. When the Protestants opened a school that was a boarding school, many of us moved there. And that's how I went to Kabete, which is today Mereliki. But I was there for only 2 years. I repeated KCPE. I'm not ashamed to say that. And I have a problem with people who say children should not repeat. Because when I was doing KCPE, the first time I didn't know whether I was going or coming. I had not taken education seriously. Until I saw a girl who was in my class coming back to visit us in high school uniform. Very humble, white blouse, khaki skirt, and a green tie. And for me, that was it. And I can say I worked and passed. 2 of us went from Kabete to the African Girls High School. And from there, let me say I liked school. We had teachers, only one African, and that is Mrs. Waidaka, Joan Waidaka. She had come from Makerere. And again for me, Makerere became, you know how something gets stuck in your head? You wanted to go to Makerere. What they were studying in Makerere, you didn't care. But for me, I remembered songs you used to sing as children. I'm sure you didn't sing them in your day in primary school. Translate. You know a song in primary school, when you are doing your exercise, that's the kind of song you are singing. Makerere got stuck, and then you see an African teacher who had come from Makerere, a woman. That image was very, very powerful. And I always say I enjoyed high school very much indeed. And passed, and I went to Makerere. From Makerere, I did a diploma in education. I then came back to teach. And from there, it was education through and through. I got a scholarship to go to Leeds University. And there I was learning how to teach English. In Kenya, in those days, English was very important. In fact, by the time I came back in the primary school, we had adopted the mother tongue, the English as a medium of instruction. English as a medium of instruction. That was the order of the day. And although I had studied how to teach English as a foreign language, it struck me that what I was saying was not right. What was wrong with it was that although the children were doing very well, there was always a group or two that were called the slow ones. And they were slow because they couldn't read, they couldn't write properly. And I thought this has to do with the English language itself. Because first of all, it's very difficult to learn to read English. I don't know about other people, but now I've gone into the rigors of language teaching. I could see the difference. Our languages are syllabic. In Kiswahili, in Kikuyu, in any of our languages, ma is ma. It never changes. In English, I mean, you know how many varieties there are of saying the same thing. I could see there was a problem here. So I sought for permission to start an experiment, because I was working at the Curriculum Institute to develop reading materials and language materials using the mother tongue. In Nairobi, the mother tongue was Kiswahili. Okay? And then you are a teacher. You know that, in those days, children would come from playing like those children who are playing there. And the teacher would be told, teacher, Odongo was speaking in Oluo. And Odongo would be punished because you are not supposed to talk in your mother tongue. That's how far the exercise had been taken. So we started an experiment. It was very successful. 10 years later, the government adopted it. So although actually today most schools use the English medium, in kindergarten, in standard 1, 2, and 3, they use the mother tongue. In standard 3, you switch over to English, because even as you're starting, you're teaching English. I'm so happy, I feel so gratified by that we are no longer fussy about language. Even here in Nairobi, children come into the kindergarten and the teachers used to tell me, this one came without language. And that's something I really try to get rid of. They had the language, but you didn't know it. You are the one who doesn't know it. So it's your business to find out what language they speak and see if you can help them to shift to whatever language you want. But never ever say that children came without language. So that was the beginning of, I think, what do you say, your consciousness that perhaps there are things you can change. There are things you can't change, but there are things you can change. So teaching was very exciting for me. And I can tell you, it's my profession. I think I was a good teacher. My students say that everywhere. And I've enjoyed being a teacher. I used to teach even here until very recently, until I found myself, I can't keep up with the new set books and new methodologies and so on. Maybe I should just support, do capacity building of the people who I'm working with, rather than going into the classroom and teaching. But I love it. I love even now going to tell a story to children, even at kindergarten level. So that's me as in education. In terms of awareness into, for example, the disadvantages suffered by the girls, that was very clear. It's very clear. I can't tell you a specific year because we didn't start collecting data until much later. But like I've told you, I was alone in a class for a whole year. The others were all men and were older than me. I think because I was so small, I didn't get a complex. If I were older, I probably would have developed a complex. I didn't. I felt I was somebody, that kind of person. But going to a girls' school then brought me back into where I was. And the schools were good actually. African Girls High School was perhaps the best experience for me. And the teaching was good. I found school easy. I found maths easy, English, whatnot. No subject was a challenge. So perhaps you can say I derive my strength in addressing girls' issues in education from my own experience. That when I come here for 74 and find girls have difficulties understanding certain things, I say, it's not the girls, it's me as a teacher. Okay? And that's how I've been able to address even national issues in education. Because I have gathered that experience that when girls are well taught, when you give attention to them in the same way you give to, because boys will get attention whether you like it or not. Boys will put up their hand even when they don't know the answer. A girl will be very shy to put up their hand. You'd have to see them, kind of trying to raise their hand in order for you to ask them a question. That courage wasn't there. And those are the things we started talking to teachers about. even before we got into girls' rights, whatever. We did a lot of work on the ground, trying to get teachers to give the same attention to boys as to girls. To get the ministry, that was more recent, the Ministry of Education, to actually work out why are girls disadvantaged, why are girls so few in science, mathematics. Because then you look at the universities and you notice girls were not training as doctors. Even when you go to law, it's dominated by men. What is wrong? Because in school, if you do the right things, the girls do very well. So what is happening? And I think a lot of those issues have been addressed, and today people are complaining that the girls are too many in medicine, in law, in many of the courses that we know about, but we still have problems in engineering and architecture, because they are related and so on. But that has to do with people's perception rather than the qualification. Even those who get straight A's may not necessarily want to go and do engineering. You know what the society calls hard sciences. We kind of say that's nonsense. There's nothing hard. They can do it. They can do it when they are encouraged, when they are taught right. But the society's perceptions of certain careers and so on would have to be corrected. I'm happy about the work that has gone on and that I was part of it. I was not necessarily leading when we did gender training and sensitization. That was many of us, not just me. And I think I was at the right time, at the right place, and I was able to think now. And rather than thinking alone, you are now thinking with others.
And maybe you can try this with the role of FAWE, where you are such a critical person.
The role of FAWE came rather late in the day. Let me say I was in the women's movement since the 60s, and even was elected in my absence as vice president. Those days we used to be called vice president of Maendeleo ya Wanawake in 1967. That's a long time ago. I can't remember how old I was, but I was shocked.
You were elected
as vice president of Maendeleo. Yeah, what I had done is that I had represented, when I was abroad, I was requested to represent Maendeleo in an international conference. I came back and gave a report, and I think the women were very happy about that report. I told them how I had campaigned to bring the next meeting to Kenya. That was a bit ambitious. I don't know where I developed the courage from. We didn't get it, but we got the next one in Australia, because as the vice president of Maendeleo, then we were able to fundraise, and 2 of us went to Australia and managed to get a meeting here. By that time, I had managed to talk to foreign affairs and everybody who needed to give permission, and so that was easy. When you get into leadership, somehow you get into the limelight.
So you were in Maendeleo from 1967 to?
67, I was in Maendeleo. I think I must have been there until past 74. Because in 1974, in fact, when I was in Australia, that's when somebody called and said, "How would you like to be a member of parliament?" And I laughed, and I said, what joke are you making? I had never imagined myself being in parliament. And then when I got back here, I was told Micere wants to nominate you to parliament. And I said, good Lord, Micere was so far away from me. How did he know me? Or when people had talked about it, I had several radio programs, sorry. I used to teach in the faculty, in the Department of Literature. And the people who are in charge of literature and social studies and so on have given us, not just me, Chris Wanjala, for example, a program to be running. And I remember talking about Franz Fanon. Okay? And these are the people that were really talking about decolonizing the mind and, you know, trying to show us what colonialism has done to us and so on. And that program was very popular. In fact, I remember people stopping me and saying, hey, where do you get all this information from? And I'll tell them that I teach literature, so I have no choice but to read what is related to literature. So there was the radio. Then when I came back from Australia, in order to announce that the next conference will be held in Nairobi, okay? I guess that's why when then my face becomes a little political, and that's when people got awakened to the fact that, hey, because at that time there were only two other women. There was Grace Onyango, who was elected in Nyanza. There was Mrs. Gachukia, Jemima Gachukia. Two only. So even the example of how women should participate in parliament and so on, I mean, it was incredible. So I was very scared to go to parliament. Even when we were briefed, I don't know. So what I think drove me those 5 years is because Mzee had said that I'm there to represent women's interests. There's no line to draw between women and children. Their health, their education, and so on and so forth. And I found myself coming up with ideas that today can be said to be quite original, because I've been revisiting Hansards. I have read Hansards now, and I can see that whatever bill came in, whether we were discussing the budget, whether there was a motion on roads or anything else, I found a way of relating it to women and their education and their development. That period was very, very, very useful for me, because I realized what a privilege it is to sit in that house. I don't remember moving a single motion, but my contribution, I seem to have talked on every subject, every motion that came, I had something to say. In fact, I was reading the first 4 or 5 years and wondering, hey, were the speakers favoring me? How did I, or was I so young that I would jump up when you know, that kind of thing. So I did not understand, and it took me a long time to realize why the first 5 years had that impact. Issues to do with child spacing, family planning, which you were careful about because it was not very popular then, but you want to focus on the women and convince them that child spacing was good for them. That was my language. That's the advantage also of studying language. You can find a way of saying an offensive thing so that it becomes palatable to a lot of people. So really that's what I did.
That was important.
That's what I did. That was the first 5 years of politics. When I finished that term, I went back to the university and continued teaching. And I was called after elections. And I was told, what are you doing? I said, I'm teaching. Oh, but the president wants to nominate you to parliament. That one I was shocked about. That one, I have to tell you the truth. And this time, more women came.
That was number 2.
That was 78. Yeah. 74 to 70, first 5 years. Okay. And then the next 5 years. Yeah. I'm getting rusty. So I came back, and by this time, although I was still nominated, people asked me why I'm not standing for election. I told them I'm a teacher. plain and simple. But also, if you thought of yourself going into a campaign then, maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I heard things that other women were suffering. And to tell you the truth, I didn't see the point of going through that harassment. And I was happy to be back in my classes teaching. And there's a lot of politics in literature. And I also wanted to complete my postgraduate studies. That was my other attraction. So the second term was better. When you are a member of parliament nominated, you are national actually. And when I was nominated, I don't know why women felt they had a right to me and my time. So I traveled throughout Kenya, doing a harambe here, doing this for women, doing that with women. It was a wonderful time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The second half, I thought, wow, let me do better than I did last time. They were more sensitive politically. You had to be careful what you are saying in parliament. I didn't feel that freedom that I had before, but it was an opportunity without the harassment of going through elections. I keep on saying, if you are nominated, MCA or whatever, you can do whatever you can to fulfill the mandate that you are there for. And I think I tried, but I thank God for even that, because as I told you, I'm reading Hansards now, and I don't see where I could have gotten either the knowledge or the courage in a house full of all those men. And until the issue of the marriage bill came in before parliament, I had never felt disadvantaged. But that time was so bad. If I had an opportune moment, I would have resigned. Today I can say I'm happy I didn't resign. Yeah, that's when you subject yourself to being called names and who are you fighting for and all that kind of thing. You know how men feel offended, especially if they didn't get on with their wives. They take it out on you. Yeah, that is the only time I felt disadvantaged in parliament. But we had other women. We had Honorable Dr. Julia Ojambo, who was an assistant minister. She was my classmate in high school. There was Phoebe Asio. There was Grace Onyango, of course. She was a veteran. She was deputy speaker and very authoritative and a woman to admire any day of the week. I think there was another one because we were for the fourth. And that you know, with a few more, more of us, I think I felt a little more comfortable because these are people I could call together. I was no longer too young to convene anything. I was also happy to work with them because then they would help me with their constituency issues affecting women and children, and therefore my contribution will probably be more substantive. I haven't reached there. That's what I'm just completing the first 5 years. But I'm sure even in the second one, apart from the marriage bill where I wanted to be able to have a caucus, or create a caucus where I could discuss with the men how important it is to make families secure. But no, in those days, issues of equality and all that kind of, and the women's decade had not helped us very much. And I remember saying that both in Mexico and also in Copenhagen, and especially in Beijing. In Africa, equality has no meaning. Development has a lot of meaning because it means you are really empowering women. We are talking about issues that they understand. If you talk about equality at grassroots, they don't understand. When in the West they were taking off their bras, we said our women don't have bras anyway to take off. So let's focus on issues that matter to them. And that was water, that was food, that was education, in that order. And those were the women's priorities in Kenya. I was very happy to lead the delegation to Mexico.
1970.
Yes, I was the leader. We had the government statement. Of course, we had committed the government quite a lot from the National Council of Women, which I came to chair later, and crystallize a lot of things that are woolly in my mind, and then you didn't feel lonely. You had a caucus of women with whom you could brainstorm and even write views, women's views. To the Gachukia report, for example, we did submit a paper. I don't think we had done, apart from issuing memoranda, I don't think we had issued papers to any other commission as women of Kenya. So that was my politics. Sorry, I'm long-winded. FAWE. Sorry, you can leave out any of these which you find irrelevant. But FAWE came at a time when I was very, very, very involved in the education and its impact on development of women. Education of women and its impact on development. Because of having a lot of time to write about it, to talk about it, and leading the NGO Forum 85, and also attending the World Conference for All in Education, the EFA conference in Bangkok, my mind was very, very clear. Not only that girls are very disadvantaged, I had scientific facts, and I was able to cite these, not just among the UN agencies, but particularly with the government, because you could see where action needs to be taken. Then a friend that had been to Beijing called me to the World Conference, to the World Conference on Education for All in Bangkok, and said, Eddah, we met as African Women Ministers of Education, and we decided to create an organization. Can you write us a concept paper? Philomena, I didn't know what a concept paper was. But I just sat one night and decided, hey, supposing I were the Minister for Education in Kenya, what would I want to do for girls and women in Kenya? And that was my concept paper. And I sent it to them. There were 5 of them then. I knew of only one. Then she told me, look for others like me. And I did. I tried to look for all women ministers of education, all assistant ministers of education.
In Africa?
In Africa. I decided to include vice-chancellors of universities because I felt that they too can have impact at that level. And when I sent this concept paper to them and told them what I would do, how I would keep records on girls' performance, what I would do to empower teachers to focus on girls, I decided, hey, we are sitting in very important positions and we are looking at education in a global manner. Kumbe, I can focus on my countries and leave some impact during the years I'm going to be there. These are politicians. So they decided to form an organization. And that organization was actually formed in Bellagio, Italy. We came out with a clear program, with clear ideas on what we can do as individual ministers or assistant ministers. From there, I kept on writing to them and telling them, you know what, I've discovered that if you bring in male ministers of education, you might have more impact. So we created, we convened a ministers conference. This one was in Mauritius, and The men came, but they were not particularly interested initially. But when a paper was presented on how girls are dropping out of school, for example, this was a common phenomenon.
That is 1986.
1994. 1994. You could see even the minister who was reading a newspaper putting it down and starting to listen. Because at its conclusion, the paper had been written by Dr. Sheila Amahiu and Wangoi Njau. And they were citing a NAMREF report from Kenya. But the dropout data had come during the World Conference, and places like South Africa and Botswana, the rates of dropout were very, very high. So we said, fine, this report is saying that every year 10,000 girls drop out of school. And you know, they started scratching their heads because they were asked, if 10,000 girls drop out of school every year, how many secondary schools is that? And you know, at that time, not many secondary schools were big. 600 would have been maybe the largest. Divide 10,000 by 600. It's like closing how many schools in a year? They decided we better do something about it. And by the end of that conference, the male ministers were on board. So FAWE then decided to have a category of membership that we called associate members, which was, I think, a brilliant idea. Associate. Because whatever data we had, whatever information we had, we sent to all African ministers. And at their own level, they were able to take some action. And it stopped being a taboo. The fact that pregnant girls should stay on in school, because what you are doing by throwing them out is creating a cycle of poverty. You are sending them back to their poor parents, then they have a baby, and the baby is born into a poor household. You have not helped the issue of national development at all. In your effort to punish one girl, look at what you have done to your development records. So I feel very happy about that.
So what role did you play in FAWE?
In FAWE, I was the founding executive director. Yeah. 1992, that's when I was called, that's when I wrote the concept paper. By 1993, I had registered FAWE as an organization in Kenya. But encompassing, at that time maybe it was 25 African countries, today there are 35. So we had chapters, one after the other. Today there are 35 chapters. All working towards improving, increasing.
Which year did you leave FAWE?
Eh?
Which year? Because after
Which year?
1983 you stayed on
until 1997.
Yes,
1997. 1998, I think. Yeah.
Chapter after chapter until now 35. Now
it was definitely 8 years, I think, from 1992.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank God. Let me not always appear like we are taking credit as African women. We had very great support from a few development partners who were interested in the education of girls and women in Africa, because the data from the World Conference was very, very, very striking. It was very poor. The participation of girls, no one would have left that meeting without a kind of commitment. So it was for us now to get hold of that mood, that momentum, and use it. And I can cite organizations, governments, of course, some of them, like the Norwegian government, NORAD, the Rockefeller Foundation. They were very, very, very supportive. However, African women, as you know, very practical. They decided very early they are not going to be funded by donors all their lives. So they started fundraising in their own countries. They created chapters in every country, national chapter. So when we talk about 35 countries represented, we are talking about chapters, national chapters in 35 African countries. Yeah.
NCWK?
NCWK was there many years earlier.
Before that,
Yes.
Yes, I would like to know,
I think, yeah.
by the time you left in 1998,
Yes.
what would you say were the key achievements?
Oops. I think those were the best years of my life, actually. Let me say that. Like the African Girls High School, where I was very creative. Incidentally, I did drama, I conducted choirs, and you can hear I can't sing a thing now. Okay. FAWE.
Can I give you a bit of water?
Give me, I think so. That's why she put it there.
Yeah.
Just give it to me, the glass. I call it good.
Key achievements.
I call it good because, and it was by accident. You see, that's what happens. I was not appointed. I was not, trained for it. But in terms of mobilizing, because now you are touched. You are touched because you've been thinking about Africa. Africa, what are we taking to the World Conference? And you would get even the ministers to come down to earth and realize actually we go to World Conferences to listen to other people when we have our own issues. And that I was very, very strong about. That was before FAWE. I think it was in the year 2000. No, it was 1990 was the World Conference in Bangkok on education.
Jomtien. Jomtien.
In Jomtien,
Yes.
Thailand. Jomtien, not Bangkok.
Yes.
Jomtien, Thailand. We did a lot of background work in terms of holding outside meetings, so that people don't come here to listen to the World Bank and other very loud people, but whose presence, for example, in Africa, you can't see. Okay? We felt the need for Africa to begin now leading discussions like those. And that's why we were so grateful that some of the people who are there and then met again were willing to support an indigenous effort. That's why the African Women Educationalists, it's an African organization. We've never shied away. It's African women thinking for Africa, thinking about African women and girls, and being in powerful positions to change the status quo. One of the things I had suggested is changing the policy. If you have money, for example, to build science labs, why do you give so much to boys' schools and so little to girls' schools? If you are really, determined to get, girls into sciences and maths and technology, then perhaps you should look at the side that is disadvantaged and perhaps invest more there. And from that time, I'm sure you are aware, the ministry started even in announcing the results, saying so many girls, so many boys. Okay? So many girls, so many boys performed well in this or that or that. So many girls did not perform well in mathematics. So we say, but the minister, why? Why? And yet we know from Wangari Maathai and a few others that they can do science and go into veterinary science and go into other careers. So even they started thinking, and they were very, I think they were cooperative. I'll not name particular ministers, but I'll remember when I came back from Mauritius, our minister had not been there, but the assistant minister who came and briefed him. And then he announced that From now on, girls who get pregnant in Kenya schools will be allowed to continue with their education. You know what the standard wrote? If anybody is going to be happy in this country, it is Eddah Gachukia. Okay? So that's how I knew that word gets round, that you are firm on this thing and you don't waver because you are doing it out of conviction. Okay? So I got into FAWE by accident, but by the end of it, to tell you the truth, after that conference in Mauritius, I felt I had done enough by getting African ministers to just start looking at the data themselves, to get their ministries. I mean, we have a department of statistics, even in the Ministry of Education. So when the politicians wanted to fight me, and they say, where does she get her data from? And I say, I got it from the ministry's planning unit. I don't create data. Those times we had no researchers. You only went to the ministry itself and got that data. You see? It's not like today when I can call WAC or any other organization or even the universities and say, please help me on this one. The first time I called the University of Nairobi to give us data on affirmative action, a woman deputy vice-chancellor said, what does she want this data for? Because it was supposed to be, according to them, to give the government a bad name. If you want to succeed in any venture, make sure the government doesn't come full force to oppose you, because they can render you completely useless. So it's a question of recognizing where the strengths are and where you can win and where you will not win. And that is something we debated a lot in those years. But here you are, in an organization, Philomena, of African women ministers of education. When she says this in her country, everybody listens. Do you see? Yeah. And they don't even have to be as strong as our Martha Karua. Martha Karua spoke and everybody actually started thinking, because she's so articulate, because she's so clear in her mind, because the same thing with Wangari on the trees and the environment and rain when it comes and rivers and soil erosion. She was an expert. Okay? And yet she was not forceful. She doesn't have even a strong voice like me. Okay? So, to tell you the truth, I had to learn to be soft. I had to learn to be soft. Yeah.
NCWK?
You don't have to be like them.
NCWK?
NCWK, I was elected in 1976. And I was there for 3 years.
Sorry, what about the 76?
Maendeleo.
That is when you got in?
When I 76. Yeah. And you realize all this time I was trying to pursue a PhD. That was a lost cause. Because there were more exciting things to do. More practical, more impact out there. I mean, a PhD. If I didn't have Professor Micere Mugo, I would never have finished that thesis. But when she read various drafts I had submitted, then she said, we have something here. And they really got to discipline me. And I was able to finish it before the second parliament ended. Yes. National Council of Women, 1976, I came in, and the first thing you notice is that a council of all women's organizations can be very impactful. With this organization doing this, Maendeleo is grassroots. I just come from there. I mean, talk about nurses association in the field of health. And that's when actually I became an expert in everything.
So what was the focus? What was the aim of?
What was the
aim of NCWK?
NCWK was to collate. You know, when people are scattered, you may not see their impact. And the National Council of Women was created at independence. It had been there all that time. 76, that's when I think we began emphasizing either this program or that program. Supporting nurses, supporting the other group there, whether and that's when we submitted this memorandum to the Gachati Commission. And that meant just getting a group of women like you who are interested in education to submit the needs of girls and women. I've looked for that paper, I can't find it. Those are the disadvantages of serving when you are very young. You don't realize the need to preserve. And there were no computers. Of course, there were no computers. And the records of the National Council of Women got burned several times. So there are no records from the headquarters. But uniting women so that it doesn't matter what agenda it is, all organizations are supporting it. When Wangari came with the issue of environment and trees, and she just came and said, you know, one thing women can do is to plant trees because of ABCD. She was talking from the University of Nairobi. I said to her, and because she was in Chiromo, Kabete, far away, many people didn't know her. So I said, hey, you clever professor, come over. So we recruited her into the council as an advisor, planting trees. And they would set up a piece of land, and the children and the teachers and the community would come, and we would supply the seedlings. Water. That was when the Kenya Water for Health organization was created, because we had gathered a lot of support from Mexico when we had that as our agenda. And you know, water was our priority number one in Kenya. This had come from all the provinces. So sometimes you work even against your own conscience. In my own writing, I had said education is the most important. Why? Because in Nairobi, when you go to the shower, you just turn on a tap. But look at the rural woman in Kitui, in Mararao, other places. You can see it now, particularly when there is drought. And that's what we took to Mexico. The world could not believe it. Water. They couldn't believe it. So when they came here in 1985, we actually took them out to see the whole world in different directions to experience the hard work women have to do, and children, and those children mostly are girls, to access water. And we were asking them, when you get water in a can, even if it's 5 gallons, when you get home, what is it for? And in Maendeleo would say, you wash your children, you wash your dishes, you do this. It is so theoretical. Women need more access to water. And so we started that project of helping women to mold water jars, and UNICEF supported that effort. That's really the kind of work that was undertaken under the National Council of Women, not by the council, but its various wings and various organizations, and kind of guiding them as to where they can have the greatest impact. The paper for the health for water was written by the nurses. Mrs. Kerene wrote that for us at that time. So we always call her the mother of the NGO water program. Even today, you know, it's even housed in government in the industrial area. And the government gives it as an example of what NGOs are capable of achieving. in that area of development. That was the National Council of Women, but also that representation of what we thought was the women's national agenda, regardless of who was discussing it at any one time. We now are developing expertise. And if it's health, we knew who were the experts. If it's law, that's when FIDA was created. Okay? And you know how loud FIDA is today.
Yes.
I mean, today I don't comment on any legal issues because I say go and find out from FIDA.
Yes.
And it's that also. If I say humility, I sound like I'm being arrogant. No, you don't know everything. But you have so many people that can work with you to help you achieve whatever dream that you have. That's why it appears like my life, impacted several areas. But you can see from the women's organizations to politics, and I was fundraising for the women's groups, and I was fundraising for a water project. I was fundraising for a school, and I never stopped talking about girls.
Now, your views, General, now as we wind up, your views about the whole, the women movement, pre-independent, during the time you have talked up to date, what do you feel about?
Let me tell you,
where we have come from and where we are, and probably how you would feel we want to go.
During the emergency, I was a child. I was really, I was going to high school and so on. But the suffering that happened even to us as children was unbearable. It's hard to try and remember. Even as I was going to university, coming back for holiday, I would go and seek from the DO's office a holiday job. And what job did he give me? To work with the Red Cross officer. And I went to one of our villages, and the first thing the people did was to take me to where they had buried 14 children. 14 children. What happened? Is there an epidemic? They said no, they just neglect because their mothers were arrested with their husbands and that kind of thing. So things like those are things you don't want to forget them, but you may not have participated yourself, but the whole total experience was very, very demoralizing. And my role now was to cook them uji. To cook uji, particularly for the children, and make sure they have it before I go home. That was what the Red Cross used to do. I was very, very respectful, not afraid of the women who were fully involved in the freedom movement. The point of endangering their lives, because obviously they thought very far and they saw more than us as children could see. I remember at high school following very, very, very closely the trial in Kapenguria. And I would run and get the standard newspaper, read it very quickly. What was said, then Esprit, our names I knew very well, and I would come and narrate it to the other girls. This is what then Esprit did, and so on and so forth. So hoping, of course, that Kenyatta would be released, would be judged not guilty. Yes, finally, guilty. In high school, in Form 3 and 4, you are studying set books, national set books, Shakespeare, who, and every year, the National Theatre put up a Shakespeare play. In school, we were segregated. And girls from other places could go to the play, but those of us from Central Province could not go. because you needed a pass to go to Nairobi. Okay? Now, the worst thing is that if we are going for a school event, because I was in team 1 of netball, I was a shooter, we would be at Kenya High School, we would be at Duchess of Gloucester, and I didn't need a pass. But when it's something for my benefit, I can't go because I'm who I am, or I come from where I come from. So people talk about discrimination as if even children didn't see it, they didn't experience it. But I remember us, we were very bitter because we all beat Kenya High School. We would come back singing, wageni wana viatu, sisi hatuna. Wageni wana swimming pool, wananchi hawana. You know, a kind of thing. It is bells of very early consciousness to the issue of racial discrimination. So you could see that when we went home for holidays, people had been gathered into camps. We would go home and cultivate our shamba. In the evening, we are traveling 10 kilometers to go to where we are supposed to sleep. You can't forget things like that. It was hardship for everybody. But of course, we were not old enough to join the forces. And even if we were, they would not have agreed because they wanted us in school. They wanted us in school because Kenyatta had said it's education that will help us win whatever independence that we want and to be able to govern ourselves. So I don't know what you would call that. Yeah, but I know young men that went home for holidays and didn't go back to school. Yeah, because they joined the forces in Abadeas and other places.
Yeah, that's nice. Prof, do you have any other question? I know we can stay here. We are trying to summarize.
It's ridiculous.
You have been such a key.
You asked for it.
In the women movement.
You asked for it.
Yeah. So,
I'm sure you didn't get this, even when you kept me here for until 11 p.m.
Yes, we know. That's why we are selecting.
It's a long life, Elishiba.
I know. And we really appreciate.
And you know what we've done in gender training.
Yes.
And you know who we have trained.
Yes, I know.
And you are still doing it.
Yes.
I understand you have even been to the police.
Yes, we have been.
So they are more sensitive now about cases involving women.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't feel there's an end to my story.
Exactly.
We want your memoirs next.
Because I can
Read
see
your memoirs.
the people who. And then when we were writing the curriculum, you remember?
Yes,
Where we put gender issues, Central at the Riara University. Central.
Yes.
No
Well, in these
young
schools
woman
are
or
trained
man
teachers,
must leave the university without knowing what the issues there are. Whether you are going to KBC, whether you are going to, wherever, you must be able to analyze for whoever you are working for, what the issues are.
You are also in FEMNET. Were you in FEMNET?
Yes,
I think you were in FEMNET.
FEMNET I created. All those organizations were created in that veranda where you came
Just
in.
tell us something a bit about your role in feminine.
In my room. Oh, you talk really about FAWE.
She was there with
FAWE and CWK and Maendeleo.
Feminine.
Maendeleo, I regret a little because in those days we did know a lot about development and that shangas, these necklaces and kiondos is not all women can do. Okay? And that was one way of raising funds for FAWE. They were told by African women, we went to the World Bank, and they were told, you have been in Africa for the last 40 years, and we are looking at your impact, and we can't see. For once, work with an indigenous organization and see whether we will be able to make a difference. I can tell you by 1998, governments were producing very different figures. Yeah, very different figures on education. and analysis by gender. This now became the order of the day. Yeah.
Feminine.
Femnet, 1972, no, before the World Conference, in Nairobi,
Before 1985.
1984. 1984. Femnet was created at the East Africa West African Decade. The Decade Conference, but in East Africa. The Eastern and Southern Africa were gathered in Arusha. And most of the delegations were made up of governments. There were no NGOs. If you were an NGO, you sneaked into the government delegation. Now, in 1985, the world was coming to Nairobi. And NGOs out there were, already agitating as to who is organizing in Nairobi, who is bringing African women. Those are the questions we asked ourselves. And to tell you the truth, before I knew it, I had been elected chair of Femnet. So again, a lot of original thinking. Okay? African women, we don't even know each other. We don't even know that perhaps we can get into a bus and come to Nairobi. I don't need an air ticket from Kampala or from Tanzania or from even other African countries. There are other ways of traveling that we can, use ourselves. But we said then, after getting there, what are we going to do? Can we elect a committee to go and think? And that is a committee I chaired. And when we got to Nairobi, Femnet was farmed up. A lot of delegations that came, a lot of women that came to Arusha didn't even know why they were there. They were not informed, because the ones representing government were, of course, very government, and they had a paper ready. For the NGO side, we had nothing. So it was a lot of hard work. A lot of hard work. And with Njoki Wainaina, Sarah Longwe from Zambia, can't remember the others actually. We just sat down and worked out an agenda for Nairobi and what we were going to share with the rest of Africa. And again, coming back to Kenya, before I knew it, I was chair of the NGO organizing committee. The forum, which brought more than 15,000 people here, much larger than the government conference. And I'm glad you didn't ask about that one, because that one was hard.
It was hard.
That one was very hard. Yeah. Yeah, the issues women had become very political by 1984, 85. Yeah.
So now we can wind up. Meanwhile, when you are so busy like this, all over, how was your marriage?
I wish you know him.
At the motherhood.
These gentlemen don't know him.
Yeah, I know him.
He's incredible.
At the children.
He's incredible. In fact, after doing my after getting that first class degree at the University of Nairobi, I wasn't going to go back because I hate exams. I hate exams. Let me tell you a secret. Don't record that one.
No,
I was something.
Happiness.
Apart from the politics, I hate being attacked. Not because it's something I have done, but because it's something I am trying to popularize and tell Kenyans this is the way to go. And then people hit you. It's like throwing stones at you, kind of thing. And yet you can't keep quiet. I think that's the worst thing. That's the conflict that arises in you. And probably I would have given up ages ago. if I suffered the kind of insult, for example, Honorable Dr. Julia Ojambo suffered the first time she stood, being told, go home and cook for your husband. You know, things that, and people have suffered even worse thing. And she got elected and proved herself and was elected again. Okay? But people can really target you. And some of these abuses are coming from your opponents. It's not the populace there. It's not the population that is rejecting you. Okay? It's also the concept that you are a woman and you can't do whatever. And the leadership is for men, let's face it. In those days, hey, a woman trying to get anywhere, forget it. Yeah. It was not accepted, really. And I always thank God. Somebody like my father was very forward-looking. I still don't understand what kind of man he was. Because 1943, Elishiba, he would ask us for our books, and he would go through and see whether there's a cross, whether there's a tick, and you have to explain that cross. Okay? A parent like that, so early in your life, hey, that's what you call a head start. But there are parents like that today. So I would live that life again. I would try and be more conscious of what my responsibilities are, and I will feel stronger about fulfilling the mandate that I attribute to God myself. In those days, I might have thought I was alone, but today, that was a big mistake. Because you should go back and say, Lord, you put me here, you better carry the baby. and he does guide you. He does guide you. It doesn't matter whether a woman or a man and so on, that faith is very important. That actually you are not alone. Otherwise, who would have known that 6-year-old would have been throughout all these phases of life? And the day the year we had that coup, that's when I got my PhD.
1982.
Eh?
The coup of 1971.
No, the second.
82.
Attempted.
The attempted one.
Attempted.
82.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
So it's a long time also in leadership.
Yes.
But it was not something you go into willingly. In fact, I was saying if I write an autobiography, I might call it the unwilling leader. Because you don't go into it deliberately. Now, people say, how did you create this whole institution? I said, by accident.
By God's design.
And it was honestly an accident. Somebody happened to be going back to the UK. They were selling this house. We were out living on a farm. We had children who were, 10, 12, 13. Okay? I was a student at the University of Nairobi. I would come and drop them in school and then go to school myself. And then when I finished, I would go back and collect them. Many are the times that I collected them and we came and ate sandwiches together in the car. Because my husband was a chief of protocol. A chief of protocol in Kenyatta's time, you had no family, okay? Because he never went anywhere. People came to Kenyatta, okay? I think he only traveled to Ethiopia once. After that, never. All heads of state would come here, and he was there for 10 years. And he decided nothing more. So it was quite alive, those 10 years. So motherhood, we enjoyed ourselves. Sometimes they say they were neglected.
Yeah.
But there you are, because they are
Yeah,
saying
you
that
balance.
because now they have children,
We are able to
and the
balance.
children accuse them.
They are doing the same.
Hey, we thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
for this.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge.
The results,
Yes.
and then went off to Sweden
Yes.
with another team from the curriculum development unit. I came back, he told me you better go and start your course at the University of Nairobi. I wasn't going to do any masters or anything. He enrolled, and those forms have never been signed. That's what the registrars kept reminding me about.
Really supportive.
When am I going to sign? Okay? So that's a kind of support.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of
We
support.
thank you for
Yeah.
for him.